Welcome to Bedtime Empires, where the past breathes and legends never sleep. Tonight, we journey not just into history, but into the fading dreams of an emperor. It is the year 1815, rain-soaked fields echo with the last thunder of cannon fire. Destiny waits at Waterloo, and Napoleon dreams one final dream. Close your eyes. Let the empire rise one last time. The low thud of cannon fire had become a distant echo by the time the curtains parted. A thin sliver of light spread across the floor of the modest chamber at Château de l'Équin. Outside, the morning mist curled like smoke across the Belgian fields, a veil between memory and ruin. Napoleon Bonaparte sat upright on the edge of a narrow cot, fingers twitching slightly, tracing invisible lines across his knee. His uniform, though cleaned and repressed daily, no longer gleamed. The gold trim had dulled. He still wore the tricolor sash across his waist knot, out of necessity, but ritual, identity. A servant silent, trained in discretion, entered with a tray of chicory coffee and a single croissant. He set it on the table without a word. Napoleon did not look up. "Did they ride out this morning?" he asked in French, voice hoarse with age and disuse. "Oui, sire. Marshal Bertrand and General Gourgaud left at first light. They will return before evening." Napoleon nodded slowly, still not meeting the man's gaze. The servant bowed and left, the door closing with a soft click. He was alone again. He turned his gaze to the window. The fields were quiet now. Cattle grazed near the distant hedgerows. The wind stirred the trees like whispers from another world. He could almost imagine the sound of drums again, the rattle of musket volleys, the guttural French cries of the old guard moving to the front. "La garde meurt mais ne se rend pas," he whispered the old words under his breath. A lie, perhaps, or a dream. His dream. The morning dragged, as most did. His joints ached. His mind wandered often not in pleasant directions. The doctors claimed his body was failing, that the sulphurous fumes of Elba had poisoned him, that his liver was turning traitor. He laughed when they said so. What did they know of betrayal? He stood slowly, laboriously, and walked to the desk by the window. There, he unfurled a worn leather folder. Inside it were maps of Belgium, of France, of the world as it once was, bright with imperial red and blue. Atop them sat another object, a miniature figurine of a horse and rider, made of ivory, hand-carved. He picked it up, turning it between thumb and forefinger. "Marengo," he said aloud. The name tasted like wine. A knock at the door interrupted him. "Enter." The figure who stepped through was thin, pale, his uniform impeccable. General Henri Gatien Bertrand, loyal to the last, always loyal. "Sire, we have it," Bertrand said, producing a bound leather book from beneath his coat, the transcript from the field surgeon at Hougoumont. "And this," he held out a faded scrap of parchment, yellowed at the edges. "A letter, found on a fallen courier, addressed to Blucher." Napoleon took the letter with trembling hands. The seal had broken, but the ink was legible. The Prussians had been closer than he realized. The message was dated the night before the battle. "So they knew," Napoleon said. "They always knew." Bertrand shifted uneasily. "There is something else, sire," he said. "From the museum at Mont-Saint-Jean, the curators uncovered a journal. It belonged to a young French soldier, Jean-Luc Moreau. He claimed he saw you long after the retreat, alone, still giving orders to the mist." Napoleon looked up. His eyes, once burning with purpose, now gleamed with something colder, wonder, perhaps, or madness. "I was never alone," he said. Bertrand hesitated. "No, sire." Napoleon returned to his chair and sat slowly. The letter still in hand, he leaned back, eyes closing. "Do you believe a man can rewrite his fate, Henri?" Bertrand bowed his head. "No man has come closer than you, sire." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves. A storm threatened on the horizon. Napoleon's fingers tightened around the letter. "Then, let us begin again. The year is 1815 once more. The sun hung low over the French camp at Charleroi, a red eye peering through layers of cloud. Horses snorted in the paddocks. Men sharpened bayonets, checked their packs, muttered their prayers. Fires flickered along the lines as dusk settled. Napoleon sat at a portable desk beneath a canvas awning, poring over fresh reconnaissance reports. Before him, maps of the Belgian countryside sprawled like arteries, pulsing with imaginary blood. "Where is Wellington?" he muttered. "Near Quatre Bras," replied Marshal Ney, standing just behind him. Ney's uniform bore the marks of campaign mud on the boots, powder on the cuffs, but his eyes were alive with fire. "His right is weak," Ney continued. "We can divide them." Napoleon nodded absently. "We must move fast. Strike before the Prussians unite with them." Marshal Soult approached, carrying dispatches. "Our scouts confirm Blücher's force is in camp near Ligny. He believes we are not ready to engage." "Then he underestimates us," Napoleon said, "as they always do." He stood abruptly, the energy of purpose surging into his limbs. "Tomorrow we move. Ney, take the left. Engage Wellington at Quatre Bras. I will face Blücher myself at Ligny. We must hold them both." He stared into the fire, jaw tightening. "And then, when they are bleeding, we finish them at Waterloo." The name hung in the air like a challenge. June 16, 1815, Ligny. The sun broke like a blade through the storm-laced clouds, its fractured rays glinting off bayonets and cuirasses. In the village of Ligny, the air was thick with smoke and the scent of damp earth. The Prussians were arrayed along the ridge, their blue-gray lines stark against the golden fields. Behind them, the steeples of nameless hamlets jutted like gravestones into the sky. Napoleon stood astride his mount, gray and impassive, as he surveyed the battlefield. Around him, aides-de-camp waited in tense silence. He raised his telescope and scanned the horizon. "There," he murmured, pointing. "Their left flank. Weak, unfortified. We'll drive our center like a wedge and break them." Soult leaned in. "Shall I order Girard's corps forward?" Napoleon nodded. "Yes. Tell them to advance with full fury. We strike now, before Blücher realizes what he faces." A burst of thunder echoed not from the sky, but from the earth. French cannons roared to life along the line, belching fire and iron. The ground trembled as infantry moved in disciplined formations, drums beating in time with their march. Shouts in French, Prussian, and the wordless cries of men meeting death filled the rising storm. In the distance, Prussian lines adjusted, their banners whipping in the wind. Blücher himself, mounted and wild-eyed, urged his men to hold. Napoleon pressed forward with the Imperial Guard, his cloak flaring behind him, hat tilted like a dagger into the rain. At one point, a messenger stumbled toward him, face pale. "News from Ney, sire. Quatre Bras is engaged, but he has not taken it. Wellington resists." "I expected resistance," Napoleon snapped. "What I did not expect was delay. Ney must hold them. He has the strength." He turned back toward the smoke. "Ligny is ours today, and with it, Blücher's spine." The fighting surged. Girard's corps clashed with Prussian musketeers in the village streets, bayonets flashing, blood slicking the cobblestones. Thunder cracked again, this time from the heavens. Rain fell in heavy sheets, darkening uniforms and turning the fields to muck. But the French surged forward, relentless. By nightfall, the Prussian line had collapsed. Blücher, wounded and unconscious, was dragged from the field by loyal cavalrymen. His army melted into the forests beyond. Napoleon, soaked and triumphant, watched as torchlight danced across the broken battlefield. "It begins," he whispered. "Now we drive the dagger home." The same day, Quatre Bras. Marshal Ney paced beneath the shattered remnants of a farmhouse roof, his face darkened with soot and fury. All around him, French dragoons regrouped in ragged clusters. The air was choked with powder smoke and the moans of the dying. He grabbed the arm of a passing officer. "Where is Foy's division? They were to flank the British right." "Pinned by Dutch skirmishers, Marshal. The terrain, it's worse than expected." Ney slammed a gauntleted fist into a beam. "Damn the terrain! We had the advantage." A courier arrived. his uniform torn and spattered with blood. Message from General Ryle. He says the British reinforcements are arriving from Brussels. Picton's division is on the field. Ney's jaw clenched. Then we're outnumbered, and the Emperor expected this position taken before nightfall. A silence fell. In the distance, the redcoats of Wellington's army stood firm, battered but immovable. Highlanders in kilts held the orchard. Dutch militiamen crouched behind hedgerows. They did not break. Wellington himself watched from a low rise, telescope in hand, face expressionless. He had seen Napoleon's genius before in Spain and prepared accordingly. As dusk descended, Ney ordered a final push. French cavalry thundered across the field, sabers drawn, but were met with fierce volleys and bristling squares. Horses screamed, men fell, and still the British line held. By nightfall, both armies withdrew slightly, neither claiming true victory. Ney sat alone on a stump near the edge of the woods, helmet in his hands. I failed him, he muttered. And tomorrow, the storm. June 17, 1815, between Ligny and Waterloo. The rain had not stopped. Mud clung to every boot, wheel, and hoof. Supply wagons bogged down on narrow roads. Soldiers trudged with soaked packs and damp powder. The air was full of frustration and the sour smell of wet leather. Napoleon rode in silence at the head of the column, flanked by Marshals Soult and Bertrand. His face was unreadable, though his eyes were sharp and calculating. Blücher will not rally quickly, he said at last. We struck him hard. Soult nodded, and Ney delayed Wellington, if only just. But not enough, Napoleon said. Still, if we drive between them, Wellington must face us alone. We crush him, then turn on the Prussians. He looked skyward, scowling. If the rain lets us. Bertrand cleared his throat. Shall we prepare for battle tomorrow? Yes, near Mont-Saint-Jean. There is high ground. They will take it, and we will break them from below. Napoleon turned to Soult. Send word to Grouchy. He is to pursue the Prussians with all haste. Do not let Blücher reach Wellington. Do you hear me? Do not let him reach Wellington. Soult bowed. Yes, sire. As the army moved south, artillery groaned over the sodden roads. Men grumbled but obeyed. Somewhere behind, musicians played a dirge soft march. They knew what came next. That night, as lightning lit the sky and thunder rolled like drums of war, Napoleon stood alone at the edge of a copse of trees. His silhouette, struck by firelight and wind, looked almost mythic. He whispered to the dark, I have come back from exile, from chains, from history itself. Tomorrow, I return to glory. June 18, 1815. Morning, Waterloo. The battlefield was a bowl of mud, flanked by ridges and woods, soaked from the night's deluge. Steam rose from the churned earth where hooves and boots had gouged deep into the fields. A morning mist clung to the hills, swallowing movement and muffling sound. But even the silence could not hide the gathering storm of men in steel. Napoleon stood atop a slight rise near La Belle Alliance, gazing toward the northern ridge where Wellington's army had dug in. Through his telescope, he saw British redcoats in tight formation, artillery clustered behind low breastworks, cavalry held in reserve along the Brussels road. He lowered the glass and turned to Soult. They are where I expected them. Good. Very good. Sire, said an aide breathless, General Grouchy has not yet made contact with the Prussians. No sign of them this morning. Napoleon frowned, but only slightly. They're slower than we feared. That's to our advantage. Grouchy will pin them when they emerge. He turned to Marshal Ney. Michel, you will command the left and lead d'Erlon's corps in the first assault. Pin their center. Keep them from reinforcing either wing. Ney saluted stiffly, rain clinging to his mustache. At once, sire. Napoleon's gaze hardened. Wellington fights like a fortress. Do not give him time to entrench deeper. Hit him hard. Break him fast. From the tree line, drummers began to beat the long roll. It spread down the French line like fire across dry paper, rising louder with every passing moment. Infantry columns stirred to life. The cannons were positioned, their crews wiping water from barrels and checking charges. Thousands of men prepared to move an avalanche of humanity primed to roll down the slope. Napoleon rode forward, letting them see his presence, alone a signal. The soldiers of the Armée du Nord lifted their heads at the sight of him, many shouting his name, Vive l'Empereur! Vive l'Empereur! He raised one hand, solemn and steady, then lowered it. The cannons opened. Midday Waterloo. The assault began with thunder. French batteries unleashed a barrage that shook the hills. Explosions tore through hedgerows and British lines. Smoke rolled like a tide over the field. Then, through it, d'Erlon's infantry surged forward, thousands of men in columns, bayonets fixed, shouting in rhythm. They moved toward the Allied center, toward the ridgeline, where Wellington's army stood waiting. Napoleon watched from his forward post near Rossomme, his face lit by every cannon flash. He could feel it the moment approaching, when the line would break, when the British would crack. But Wellington had chosen his ground well. Behind a shallow rise, infantry waited in defilade. As the French approached, they rose like phantoms, unleashing brutal volleys. Entire ranks of Frenchmen dropped in seconds, their columns stalling in the mud. Highlanders counterattacked with bayonets, fierce and howling. Still, d'Erlon pushed forward. A regiment of cuirassiers, glinting and monstrous, swept in to support them, crashing into the left flank of the Allied line. For a moment, just a moment, it looked as if the center would crumble. But then came the charge. British heavy cavalry, led by the Household Brigade, surged over the ridge and into the French attackers. Sabres met bayonets. Steel flashed through smoke. Horses trampled friend and foe alike. Napoleon, seeing the movement from afar, snapped his spyglass closed. "They counter too quickly," he growled. "Where is Ney? Why hasn't he reinforced?" Bertrand appeared beside him. "Reports say Ney is riding with the cuirassiers. Personally, he's leading from the front." Napoleon's mouth tightened. "Of course he is. A hammer in a world of scalpels." Another aide galloped up. "Sire, the British center holds. D'Erlon is falling back." The Emperor turned away from the field, hands behind his back. "Then we reset the board." Meanwhile, on the far right of the French line, the battle for Hougoumont raged. The old manor, its stone walls blackened by smoke, stood like a stubborn tooth in the field. It had been garrisoned early by British guards and Hanoverians, and though Napoleon had initially ordered only a diversionary assault, the fighting around it had spiraled into something far more. French light infantry clashed with British defenders among the orchards and walls. The woods around the chateau were thick with corpses, branches blown apart by grapeshot. Inside, Captain James MacDonell held the courtyard with a handful of men. Musket fire poured through shattered windows. Fire had begun to consume the chapel roof. "We hold," MacDonell shouted, dragging a wounded man behind cover. "As long as we breathe, we hold." Outside, French engineers placed charges along the gate, trying again to breach the inner courtyard. But time and again, the British slammed it shut. The narrow entry became a choke point of death. Napoleon, hearing the prolonged fighting, muttered darkly to Soult, "We waste men at a locked door. Pull them back." Soult hesitated. "Sire, Jérôme Bonaparte commands there. He refuses to withdraw." Napoleon's face hardened. "My brother plays hero while the battle moves without him. Very well. Let him burn the orchard. But not one more brigade. Do you hear me? Not one." And yet the fighting at Hougoumont did not cease. For the rest of the day, men killed each other for a farmhouse, and the farmhouse refused to fall. Afternoon, Waterloo. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained choked with smoke. The field, once a sea of green, had turned to a torn brown battlefield riddled with craters, trampled corpses, shattered gun carriages, and spent lives. Marshal Ney's face was streaked with powder and blood, his eyes wild under his bicorn. His horses, fourth of the day, reared and screamed beneath him as he rode up and down the shattered French lines. "Forward! Forward again!" he bellowed, saber raised high. "Are we not the sons of Austerlitz?" D'Erlon's corps, having regrouped in the soggy lowlands, hesitated. "Marshal!" shouted an officer. "Our lines are scattered. The enemy holds the ridge. We must wait for reinforcements. Ney struck him with the flat of his blade. There is no wait. There is only victory or death. Without orders from Napoleon, without infantry support, Ney ordered a full cavalry assault. It was madness. But the French cuirassiers obeyed. Hundreds of horsemen galloped forward into the jaws of death across muddy ground slick with the fallen, into the musketry of the British squares. The enemy formed their defensive blocks, bristling walls of bayonets, 4 deep, with red-coated riflemen at the corners. Cavalry could not break such squares. They charged anyway, again and again. Ney led them each time, his coat in tatters, his face a grim mask. From atop his command post, Napoleon watched with growing disbelief. "What is he doing?" he growled. Bertrand paled. "He spent our cavalry." "No, he's thrown them away," Napoleon whispered. "We needed them for the finish, for the final blow." He turned away, his hands trembling with fury. And in the distance, Ney charged again, on foot now, bloodied but unyielding. 4:30 p.m., near Plancenoit. From the east came a sound Napoleon had prayed not to hear. The beat of drums, the ring of iron, the song of the Prussians. General von Bülow's corps crested the forested ridge beyond the village of Plancenoit, their black and blue standards waving. They moved quickly, too quickly, across the open fields, their goal clear, to smash into the right flank of Napoleon's army and join with Wellington. The Prussians had come. An aide galloped toward the emperor. "Sire, the Prussians are upon us." Napoleon turned to General Lobau. "You will take what men you have and hold them. Delay them at Plancenoit. Every second counts." Lobau nodded once, understanding. "We will not yield." As he rode off, Napoleon turned back to Bertrand. "They march faster than expected, Blucher. That devil refuses to die." Soult approached, grim. "Do we commit the guard?" Napoleon's lips thinned. "No, not yet. Not until Wellington weakens. The guard is the soul of France. They strike only once." But the Prussians were not waiting. Soon, cannon fire lit the east like a new dawn. Plancenoit erupted in chaos, streets turned to kill zones, churchyards into slaughterhouses. Lobau's men fought with desperate fury, but were slowly pushed back by sheer weight. Napoleon watched as smoke rose from the village. He clenched his fist. "Grouchy," he muttered. "Where is Grouchy?" 6:00 p.m. The field was in shambles. Ney's cavalry lay broken. Lobau's line had bent, then cracked. The Imperial army stood in tatters between two forces, Wellington ahead, Blucher to the right. But Napoleon still had one card to play. The old guard. They had waited all day, tall bearskin shakos, eagle standards, iron discipline. These were the veterans of Egypt, of Italy, of Austerlitz and Jena. Their presence alone was legend. Napoleon rode before them now. "My children," he called, voice hoarse. "France needs you one last time. The day is not lost. Not if you carry our flag to that ridge, to him." He pointed toward Wellington's position atop Mont Saint-Jean. "If we break their center, it is over. Victory is ours. You are the hammer. Strike." The guard responded not with cheers, but silenced, a grim, solemn nod. Then they moved. 10 battalions advanced, drums beating, standards waving in the wind. British cannon fired, but the guard marched on, through the hail of iron and fire. Knee bleeding, furious, unrelenting, ran to join them on foot, shouting, "The guard advances, follow me." The battlefield seemed to hold its breath. And then, as the guard crested the ridge, they met a wall of musket fire. British troops, hidden behind the crest, rose and fired in staggered volleys. Grape shot tore through the French ranks. Still, the guard pressed forward, until they stopped. And then they fell back. Someone shouted, "La garde recule." The guard retreats. It was as if lightning had struck the heart of the French army. Panic swept through the lines. The guard is falling back. All is lost. Men began to run, then battalions, then brigades. Napoleon stared, as if disbelieving what he saw. The unthinkable. "They break," he whispered. The guard had never broken before. Until now. 7:30 p.m. Waterloo. The fall of the guard was like the cracking of a dam. What followed was a flood-an unraveling not just of formations, but of morale, identity, and the illusion of invincibility. French soldiers began to run, first in trickles, then in torrents. Whole regiments tossed their muskets aside and fled into the rain-drenched fields. Officers screamed for order, some drawing swords on their own men, but it was no use. The battlefield, once a measured stage of maneuvers and strategy, had turned to chaos. Wagon wheels stuck in the mud, horses reared and collapsed, wounded men crawled beneath feet and hooves only to be trampled. Napoleon stood still as stone atop the hill near La Belle Alliance, watching his army disintegrate. His uniform, once pristine, was now soaked through. His bicorn drooped from the rain. Bertrand rode up, wild-eyed. "Sire, we must retreat. The road to Genappe is still open, but not for long. Blucher is closing fast." Napoleon didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the field below, where the French eagle standards vanished one by one beneath the crush of retreat. "Where is Ney?" he asked, quietly. "Last seen near the guard's final position, on foot, fighting with a saber." Napoleon gave a slow nod. "Of course." A shell exploded nearby. Mud and fire rained down. Bertrand gripped his arm. "Sire, we must go." Napoleon looked at him then, truly looked at him, and Bertrand saw the wear in the Emperor's eyes. Not the fatigue of battle, but something deeper, the weight of destiny folding in on itself. He turned to his remaining aides. "Tell Soult to organize the rearguard, pull back to Charleroi. Save what you can." "And you, sire?" "I will ride with the wounded." Bertrand stared. "But—" "No arguments, Henri. Go." And with that, Napoleon turned his horse toward the rear, leaving behind the sound of cannon and the cries of dying dreams. June 19, 1815. Dawn. The Emperor rode alone for much of the night, his carriage bouncing along the rutted road to Charleroi, escorted by a small detachment of cavalry. The rain had ceased, and a pale fog hung over the countryside, blurring the edges of trees and fields. Inside the carriage, he sat slumped, the fire in his eyes now, a quiet ember. Outside, men straggled in from the shattered army groups of exhausted, hollow-eyed survivors. They saluted him half-heartedly, unsure whether he still held power, or if he was now just a memory-given form. At one village, he stepped out to stretch his legs. A boy approached No, older than 12, holding a battered French shako in his arms. "My father fought at Ligny," he said softly. Napoleon looked at the boy for a long time. "Did he survive?" The boy shook his head. The Emperor reached into his coat and pulled out a silver medal. "He fought bravely," he said, placing it in the child's hands. "France will remember." But would she? Back in the carriage, he stared at his reflection in the fogged window. The man looking back seemed older than he had any right to be. Not the conqueror of Europe, not the tyrant, not even the hero. Just a man, alone, caught between history and myth. June 21, 1815. Élysée Palace. Paris was silent when he returned. No cheers. No tricolor banners. Just a city holding its breath. The Chamber of Deputies met in emergency session. The news had spread before him. Waterloo was a catastrophe, and the Allies would not stop at the frontier this time. In the marble halls of the Élysée, Napoleon stood before the council. "You called me back to power to save France," he said. "I tried. I failed." He looked out at the silent men before him, once loyal Bonapartists, now pale with fear of what the victors would demand. "I abdicate," he said simply, "for the second and final time." The words hung in the air like a funeral bell. "And your son?" asked a voice. Napoleon hesitated. "Let France decide." Later that evening, he walked alone through the garden, the moonlight silvering the leaves. A soft breeze stirred the roses. He thought of Josephine, of Austerlitz, of fire and snow and blood, of dreams. He sat on a bench and closed his eyes. And in that moment, just for a heartbeat, he was back in the saddle again, Marengo beneath him, the field of Jena before him, the air alive with glory. July 15, 1815, aboard HMS Bellerophon off the coast of Rochefort. The British frigate waited in the bay, her sails like pale wings in the morning light. The Emperor stood on the deck of a French sloop, watching the vessel that would carry him to captivity. A British officer waited aboard the Bellerophon, stiff and formal. "You are prepared to receive me?" Napoleon asked. The officer bowed. "We are, sir." He stepped aboard without fanfare, without words. His entourage followed, silent and broken. Below decks, a cabin had been prepared, not luxurious, but sufficient. He sat by the porthole, watching France slip away. Someone asked if he had regrets. "Only that I woke," he said. October 1821, Longwood House, St. Helena. Time had grown brittle. Napoleon's body had wasted under the tropical heat, his mind drifting between memory and fever. At night, he dreamed of Moscow's snow and the blue Mediterranean. Sometimes, he spoke in campaign orders. Other times, in whispers. "Tell me, Las Cases," he said once, "did I die at Waterloo?" "No, sire." He chuckled. "Then why does it feel like a dream I never woke from?" The physician gave him laudanum. He drifted. In his final days, he wrote letters, dictated memoirs, clutched the locket of his son. And then, one morning, the Emperor of Dreams did not wake. Waterloo remains. The fields are green again, the bones are gone. Tourists walk where the guard once stood. The Lion's Mound rises over the place where dreams broke like surf against stone. And yet, when the wind moves just right, and the dusk glows red over the ridges, some say they hear it still. The roll of drums, the tramp of boots, the voice of a man shouting into destiny. Forward, always forward. And in that moment, the dream stirs again. Just for a heartbeat.